welcome to the State of Data Infrastructure. For those who doesn't know me yet, my name is Rafael. I work at Mstable. And yeah, I would like to pass it over for you to introduce yourself. Like, why don't you go, Makoto?
Okay, hello. Hi, I'm Makoto. I'm a developer at ENS, and I'm here mostly because ENS is one of the oldest smart contracts. So whenever the new data provider comes, they usually use us as an example. So I basically use most of the provider, so I can provide a view from the user.
Cool.
Hi guys, thanks for staying with us. I was afraid that at this time we'll be talking to an empty room. I'm Tomek, I'm CTO of TokenFlow. We are a new data provider, and we provide the full decoded history of blockchains, focusing not only on history of actions like events and calls, but also the state and storage history.
Hey there, my name is Hugo. I'm a growth manager at Dune Analytics. Dune, we basically are a data platform, open data platform for on-chain data. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Simon. I work for Node, which is one of the core dev teams behind the Graph protocol. And the Graph protocol is the decentralized data layer for Web3. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I think that would like to start with a question. It's like, I think since we have like a lot of people building infrastructure here, I would like to learn a little bit about like, what are you doing right now to onboard more data scientists and more people in the space to be using the infrastructure and build more things? And I would like to listen from Makoto, like how has been your experience onboarding and learning about all of these things, right?
Yeah, so I was checking kind of GitHub commits to say when I first touched each project, and I think the graph was the earliest that our actually subgraph is actually initially built by the I think graph team. Then we forked it and maintained, and the first commit was 2018 August, and I started contributing I think around 2019. And how I got to is I think Graph was quite active on the hackathons. So like when I went, I think the first time I met the team was East Denver, and you guys had a bounty. So like that just carrot. So I just went into, and it's actually great to have a kind of face-to-face kind of interaction. And at that time, I think GraphQL wasn't as popular as it is right now. So I knew nothing about GraphQL, but I just got the hands-on. Then I think Dune was 2020 March, right in the middle of the ECC conf. That was right a week before the lockdown. And actually the Frederick was there at the ECC conf, and he actually said, yeah, we are making the graph for the ENS, and can you take a look? So that's how I actually got into like sitting for the 3 days. Half of the time I was just sitting right next to the Frederick and doing that. I think because I was kind of early adopter, all the project came to me. I'm in a privileged position that all the experts just like sit down next to me, and that happened to Tomek. It was TokenFlow today that actually had just one-to-one session, and he just taught just had a like masterclass of how to use TokenFlow. So that's how I got into it. But yeah, I guess because in a blockchain space, every documentation is always lagging. So the asking to the people directly is the best way how I learn. Learning.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because I have been in many chats with that as well. I experienced this myself. But I would like to pass it over to you guys, like how you see.
Yesterday you had this great talk about the importance of using data as a foundation for building products on top of it. And I think that more and more projects today, they are maturing and they are trying actually to use the data, and they are trying to onboard data analysts and data scientists. And here is the problem, because there are not so many crypto-native good data analysts and data scientists. And on the other hand, in the traditional finance and Web2 world, there are tons of them. So many projects today try to onboard people from outside of crypto bubble. And they very quickly hit the wall because the crypto data, the blockchain data, is hard to get, hard to understand, hard to make any sense of it. So instead of like doing what they want to do and what they can do and what they are trained to do, they are fighting with getting data and processing the data, preparing the data, adding semantics to data. And this is what we try to do. We try to build an ecosystem of data, of good data, that makes people from outside of crypto to effectively build models for risk management, user management, product management. So they need the business context in data, not the not transactions and events. So this is, I think, very important.
I love this point that you mentioned, because even for when we were hiring a data scientist, like for our team, one of the things that I did was to make sure that the code example that this person was going to work on was super easy, because otherwise it would be like analyzing if they could retrieve data from on-chain, right? Which was not exercise. I wanted to see what they could do with the data. So I really,
what they hate to do. They hate to like search for data. They like data. They like to analyze data, but they hate like sourcing the data.
So something that is interesting to me is that I've been able to see how much of I don't know how to put it, but there's a huge shortage of data analysts and data scientists in the space. Because of my work, I speak to many protocols every week, and you can see how many of them have issues finding the right talent. Just because, as he was saying, not that many people have the skills of a data analyst and really understands how blockchains work and actually can understand what a transaction is and the kind of data the transaction lives, right? So it's one of the things that we have identified as something that we really need to work on, making it easier for people to become an analyst to the space. And this is an area where we are investing a lot, because, you know, if the number of people building and being able to analyze data in the space doesn't grow, then it's not going to be good for anyone. So we're launching all sorts of education initiatives, such as like async courses, but also sync courses. We did one experiment a few months ago that worked very well. We had 600 applications for 30 spots that were available. We're going to hackathons. We have launched office hours, live training sessions bi-weekly. So all of these different activities that can help us bring more people in. Yeah, and it's amazing because the moment people graduate from some of these things, it's so easy for them to get a job because of that shortage there is in the market. And it's yeah, I don't know.
And Simon, how do you see all of that? Because I think the graph became almost like this full stack thing, like a front end. As soon as you know the graph, you could consider almost yourself as a full stack developer in Web3.
Yeah, I would say that was the original value proposition, actually, that the graph, like, because also the language choice of GraphQL, of how you retrieve the data, mostly appeals to front-end developers, because that's actually the industry standard, or what was anticipated to be the industry standard. Now it is, I would say. But on the same time now, when we talk about data scientists, for them, GraphQL is not so common language of retrieving data, interestingly. Although me personally, coming from front-end, still think it's the best language. Anyway, so like one thing that we now do together with Messari, one of the new core devs, is a Python library that you can then, which is something that all data scientists are familiar in, or usually they go with Python, and then they can build their dashboards in code on top of the subgraphs that Messari creates. And also these standardized subgraphs, which have more this direction of for data scientists, are a little bit a better data source than, let's say, the ENS subgraph, which is primarily built to power the ENS website, which is a different application. So this is the thing. And on top of that, obviously, we go to hackathons and then see all the people, others, and some educational initiatives.
Okay, cool. I think I will like even send another question to you, which is, I think it's something that you talked in your previous like today, which was about the decentralized network. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you feel about the centralization point of the data infrastructure and decentralized data infrastructure that we have right now in the space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, we saw it with Tornado Cash, right? That there is a real need, and I mean, sure, you can make the argument that when the underlying data, the blockchain data, is decentralized, then you don't need to necessarily build all the stack on top also decentralized, and I think that's valid. That said, we try to create that alternative and give the people the choice, and then in the end coming with this possibility of really having a decentralized stack that is unstoppable. So one of the big value propositions of the graph is this idea of unstoppable apps, that even if the developers abandon the project, the data stack and the smart contracts and everything is still here. And even the possibility, like there's this idea of, I don't know, like when Facebook made these updates recently, or not recently, like back in the days, right? People were outrageous about the new UI, right? But they also didn't have a choice. Imagine you could just like say, oh, I just want to stay with this old version that I liked it. And that's only possible if you have a decentralized data layer.
What are your thoughts, like you guys, on this?
Yeah, I think Adun, the way we think about it when we have a discussion around these things is usually like we don't like decentralization for the sake of decentralization, or we don't like a token for the sake of a token. The token question is a question that we always get. Is Dun gonna make a token? And the question is, what for exactly, right? So if it doesn't mean that we're never going to do a token or that we're never going to decentralize our systems. It means that first we need to make sure we're building something useful for our users and that our product really works and solves problems. And I think there's a lot to do there. We're also thinking from a different point of view in terms of, like, as he was saying, these data, these systems are already open and decentralized. Anyone can get access to raw data coming from nodes, right? But the real question is, how do you make sense of this data? And it's very obvious that the amount of data that these new networks produce is just going to increase more and more and more. And so the question is, can you build some sort of open system or open platform that allows a collective of people to build shared knowledge on? And that's why Dune is very much community-oriented. It's open. For most of the data that it's not raw, everything is open source, and you can just like collaborate and add your value to it. So that's the way we're thinking about it, how to surface the right data.
And I think that to answer your question, it's quite important to understand what we mean by decentralization, because I don't believe in decentralization of petabyte volumes of data that can be effectively queried for complex analytical queries. I don't think that we have technology that's even close to this today. But what we can do, we can decentralize codes, we can decentralize pipelines. So this is what the graph is doing now, as far as I understand, is to open source and to decentralize the transformations and the pipelines, so everybody can replay everything and can verify the data. So this is this kind of like verifiability by reproducibility, very complex words in English. So you can like prove the correctness of data by replaying everything that is actually decentralized. So I think that the thing that we can do today is to decentralize pipelines, to decentralize code, not the data itself. But the data can be rebuilt by anybody, because we all use, at the end of the day, we use the same public trusted data sources.
Yeah, I love this because I feel like that's where I want to go with my question. Is it working? No. Okay, sorry. I think that's where I wanted to go with my question, is because, for example, like I feel like right now more than ever, we need to have a way to verify like how was that data built, and especially in DeFi protocols. to really show, for example, like, is that TVL really the TVL that you're saying? Like, are you generating that fees? Like, where is that all these tokens is stored, right? Like, so I don't know, like, what would be your thoughts on this? Like, that to have this auditable way of looking into the reports that we're seeing.
You mean the way to verify the data? Yeah. Again, it comes down to how open the component is. That, like, for example, in case with Dune, like I built most of the Dune dashboard for ENS, and I occasionally get DM to say, "Hey, you have a wrong SQL here and there," and it's great that, like, you know, it's not like a Dune platform itself doesn't have to be open source, but as long as my query as an end user is open source, I can get the, you know, wisdom of crowd or like someone who's better can verify. That's, yeah, that I think the key. And but at the same time, there's not much incentive. Well, it's hard that, like, there's so many queries. I think subgraph, you said like 500 subgraph you have right now
On the network.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this ENS is relatively popular, so always there's someone's eye on it. But you can't expect everybody's checking all these things. But you have a curator model, so maybe there's some sort of decentral. But, like, yeah, I think, and again, it's also it comes to the education that there's not many data layer people in the industry, so it's hard to verify. Yeah, and I think anything to do with smart contract logic, it has to be like trustless. It has to be, you know, code is law. But the data representation layer doesn't necessarily have that kind of check mechanism. So perfect example is, I think, lots of, like, you know, like degen EO farming stuff. It has like a million API and all that stuff. But, like, a million API of this, like, you know, fish swap and this, like, octopus swap, are they using like to like? It's hard to tell, you know, unless someone's examining code by code. So yeah, that's still the challenge, I think.
Okay. I think, Simon, like, I think, like, especially on this topic, like, I love the example that in your talk you mentioned how Miss Sari was finding all of these issues with data, like which kind of data it is, like which protocols produce each data. And one question that I have, like, very open to you all is, like, how do you see interoperability of data across not only between protocols, but also between platforms, right? Because, for example, even at us at Mstable, when we were building a lot of our data sets and trying to do analysis, it was a mix of everything, right? It was a mix of Dune, it was the graph, and then some other, like, in-house code. So I don't know, would love to hear your opinions on this.
Happy to go, yeah. I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is that when it comes to standardization, there's always this tension between a top-down approach and, like, a bottoms-up. Like, what I'm trying to say is, if you want to have a standard, you need to make sure some people agree into something and implement that. So it's pretty much a top-down solution. Whereas what we just said, this approach we have to data is very much open and bottoms up. Anyone can come, can build, anyone can see what others have built, anyone can build their own pipelines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's very much bottoms up and emergent. And something like this, you cannot control it and build a standard out of it. And it's the beauty of it. But I feel like for something like raw data that is coming straight from a node, I'm sure there's a lot that can be done in terms of standardization that it should be fairly easy to do. But then as you add layers on top of it, and it's user adding those layers, and it's free for everyone to do, it's very, very hard to control.
Exactly. The higher you go with the data processing, the more of things like creativity, like, you know, like competitive modes appear. But at the foundations, we basically use the same data, and the meaning of the data, of this raw data, is defined by smart contracts. So if we are, like, processing events, they are the same events, regardless of the source of the data. So if you have query written in Dune, you can run on our data sets, because if you are using events, you are using the same events, right? So at the bottom level, it should be very easy to standardize things, and we should like do it because this is very important for like this interoperability, this cooperation, collaboration on data, to have common standards, the good metadata, at least at this basic level. And it shouldn't be that hard in this space because we are starting from the same sources. And also we as a community have a great history of like doing things together. So corporate world today is investing huge money into building metadata, into like building this whole data governance systems in corpus to like make people using the same terms and the same meanings of data. We should be doing the same from the very beginning, and we have a great opportunity to actually do it.
One thing to add is like I think view for standardization of the blockchain database depends what layer you are, and I'm in a bit lower layer of like actually building like a schema and looking into the stuff. For me, it's a paradise because most of the data source they uniquely has a transaction hash. So whatever the data comes, most they say I can verify a transaction hash. This goes, I go to Etherscan and cross-check it. So like always I have a multiple reference point. Whereas if you are kind of, analyst in a bank or someone who doesn't know how transaction works, how smart contract works, it's completely black box. So for these people, if the slight name is different, they don't understand. But if in my like layer, like it's actually very standardized. Like my comparison is like I was developer. I was in a financial industry, so I used to be DBA, where like a data schema is completely irrelevant across like if you go to different banks and stuff. And in the Web2 world, there's no relevance between the Facebook API data and the Twitter API data, whereas in blockchain it's amazing because it's just everything is. You see the block, you see the transaction hash, it's standardized. But again, if you see from the surface level, it looks like complete chaos, I think. But we have a great building blocks. The lower layer it's all like standardized. So I think we are much easier to kind of bring that standardization much easier ways to the people who don't necessarily know the smart contract level, I think.
Yeah, I want to quickly go back to this verifiable data, and I think the answer here is really it depends. Like if you just build a dashboard, let's say if there's Messari data apps or with Dune, and you have a bug in however you build it, and it shows a number wrongly, like maybe a 2x or 10x wrong. I mean, like okay, it's bad data, maybe it leads to bad decisions, but you can fix the bug later, and okay. But if you use data that is the input to your risk management protocol on-chain that is managing millions of dollars, then you don't want to have this situation where like, oops, the API server had an update and now, I don't know, but the data was wrong, right? So that's why at the Graph we have this research team for verifiable queries, where the queries from the Graph network eventually should be like immediately be verified with a cryptographic technology called Roadrunner. I hope we can publish this paper in the next months. To the openness of the data, I mean, at the Graph we try to we build everything open source. And so one thing, for example, we looked at the data extraction, raw data extraction from the blockchain, and that's where the Firehose comes in. Like that's the goal there is it's open source should be an open standard for all blockchains. Streaming Fast works with not only Ethereum but also with Solana or Aptos or Cosmos or Near or Arweave to bring all this in the same formats and then layers on layers on top. That's how we want to build it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is it working now again or no? Okay. Anyway, I feel like I don't know. I feel like we still have like a couple of like open for questions, but I don't know like if the number here is correct. Otherwise, I would ask one question. Like, I have time, right? Okay. So I still have time. Okay, cool. Yeah, but I think it's wrong. There's like timer, but. Okay, so one of the questions that I would like to ask you all, like before we open for questions, is like, what do you think right now it's missing in the space, or what do you think it could be add to onboard more people into like I don't know, bringing more data scientists like to Web3?
I think that this whole data ecosystem is relatively young, still young and very basic. We have to learn a lot. I think we are ages behind Web 2 world when it comes to data analytics. We need this standardization. This is very, very important. We need to build this analytical culture in the ecosystem. This is something that we are learning a lot. And I think that the bear market is good opportunity for this, because when it's like the bull market and degen time, whatever you do, you earn money, so you don't need data at all. And when it's like the time like today, you have to analyze to select good product, you need to manage risks, you have to think about hedging your position, so you need data, right? There's this old saying that the newspapers sell best during the war, and I think that this is the time for data providers, and yeah, I'm excited about this.
Yeah. So when you talk to teams, you can see how early we are in terms of data in the space. Many teams, like most of the teams, are still relatively not that sophisticated when it comes to their data practices. So I think one thing is just having time to evolve, learn, and progress. But another thing that I'm excited about is for avenues and ways for these teams to share knowledge together and share best practices, etc. So I don't know. This is just an example. It's not to shield anything, but we did DoonCon in September. But just in general, having events or whatever online or face-to-face for these people to meet each other, learn from one another, I think it's very interesting and very important because, yeah, again, it's very early, and at the same time, data in Web3 is not exactly as data in Web2. So there are new things you need to learn and share.
Yeah, I agree. Like, sure, there's one thing that we as a community can get better by learning best practices, but I think it's also very important to try to onboard people from outside the space into the space, like grow the space basically. And I think best would be through documentation.
Come on.
No, I think actually, I mean, the bear market is the build market, right? And I mean, sure. Otherwise, you're running, trying to keep your servers running because it's crashing because everybody jumps in. But now everything is a little bit more calm, and also I think now it's the opportunity to write more tutorials, guidelines, onboard more people, take the time. Yeah.
I have more of the technical kind of request is more about so like Graph uses assembly script, and the other like token flow and the Dune uses SQL, and library support is very limiting in that, like in all the developers they use like ETH.js, Web3 Pi, and all these stuff, and it's relatively difficult. Like many people in the Ethereum industry is relatively young. They are kind of hipsters, and the SQL is like from 50s, like it's kind of like Gen X boomers language. So even in my team, there are not many people who know the SQL, and also the fact that there's lots of things. Ethereum data and the low level is very kind of binary heavy and all that stuff, and you need a lots of like data processing, and especially in ENS case, you have to do like hashing even to encoding, decoding just to match the name, and something like that. It's actually super difficult to do in any of your platform. And one thing I had to sell the Google is that Google have something called Google BigQuery, and they actually index, decode some of the data. And one advantage is that I can import ETH.js on as a user-defined function. So that actually, there's one thing I was doing. Like currently, we are defining new emoji standard in ENS because everybody loves emoji. And to run the query of the new set of emoji, I was writing the query with Google BigQuery, and because I could use ETH.js, and the ability to use battle tested these client like other programming language into your kind of like SQL or GraphQL assembly script, that would make productivity, I think increase the productivity. And it brings, it's much easier for normal devs who's diving into, get into this space, into analytics, I think.
I think this is a great example of how much there is still for us to do, like how much work there is ahead.
Yeah, interesting that you say that SQL is the boomer language, because
Not. I'm a boomer.
like it seems to be the language of choice for data scientists, and that I mean, like, I think a great amount of success of Dune is exactly that strategy of having SQL access and this flexibility.
Actually, we use Snowflake as a core data infrastructure, and in Snowflake you build queries using SQL, but you can also create your functions in JavaScript and in Python. So actually you can like utilize all those languages in querying Snowflake data.
Just talking about SQL, I think what's great about SQL is that you don't need to be a developer to be able to start using and getting results out of SQL. So actually at Dune, we have onboarded a ton of people that they don't have a CS background, but they feel comfortable using SQL. So I'm not sure if it's boomer or not, but it's definitely a great way to onboard people into the space, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, is it no again? No, okay.
I think it's your problem.
I think it's a me problem on this, like, but anyway, I feel like one of the points that I think you guys didn't touch was like that not a lot of people understand that you can query everything like on blockchain. And even me coming from like a company that we used to do data intelligence, we could never even like do data analysis on our customers' data, and not even thinking about competitors, right? So I feel like all the time that I talk this to like the friends that I had that was working there, say, hey, you cannot imagine you can query everything, right? Like you should join this space now, you know, like so it's very interesting. But yeah, thanks so much for the talk, and I would love to open the room for questions.
Yeah. Can I need for the recording? How do you all feel TradFi and Web2 coming into the space is going to change data infrastructure with big brand names like Disney, Nike, Adidas, going to the NFT market, Reddit going into NFTs and community points, and then Goldman and JP Morgan doing DeFi transactions? What do you think infrastructure is going to look like when, not if, when mass adoption comes in from Web2 and TradFi institutions? Do you think it's going to be different from now? Will they adopt these schemas and languages, or will it be something completely different? And Tomek, you'd have good insight with Snowflake and how they're thinking of things. I'd love to hear how everyone's looking at it, and then, if need be, how you're thinking through adapting to it.
Well, I think it's a huge challenge to open our crypto data to outside world, to all those players that want to analyze what's happening here and integrate this data with their own data. And we will have to, like, I think that we will have to change a little bit, and we will have to adapt our processes and our structures to provide data in a way that Disney wants to get, because they will not change for us. This is my perspective. And again, I think that we have many things to learn from the Web2 world, so this is not that bad from our perspective, especially in data analytics world. It will be a very good lesson for the whole ecosystem if the big players from outside of crypto start looking for our data, and we will have to adapt our processes, our infrastructure to serve this data effectively for them.
So in here, I think that it's like Web2 companies have way more established data practices. Pretty much everyone follows the same kind of ways of working with data. And there's a huge industry to service these needs. You have companies like Snowflake and others that are huge and pretty much have done a great work at serving these companies. Something that I'm really curious about and I really want to see is how this evolves for protocols and more of Web3 native companies and organizations. I think this is where the change really is going to need. I'm not sure the data practices for these teams are going to be exactly the same as Web2. And a lot of the infrastructure, tech, and processes, etc., is going to have to adapt. So I feel like the change is going to be coming more from that side of the market than Web2, because in order to serve Web2 companies, you pretty much have standards that you can follow, and they ask you to follow those standards.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think that they will more or less say how they want to see the data, and then someone will provide it in that form to win the business. But also agree that we can learn a lot from them, because I think in general, as the Web3 space, we should not only laugh about Web2 but also learn, because in certain areas they are like way ahead.
I think my view is that like already some big players start choosing. I think two things. One is a kind of multi-chain future. It will be more accelerated. The fact big partners are using the different chains. So like if you want to do something interesting cross-chain, all data platform natively has to support as many chains as possible, which is quite challenging. And also it has to be able to stitch them together, especially ENS. Like we are trying to support as many cross-chain as possible to let you ENS data in different chains. The challenge will be that how do they stitch them together to easily to digest. That's one thing. And another thing I personally think is the kind of privacy things that like I think some of the ZK rollup area, they're talking about data availability to be kind of not all of them are available. Some of them they can, I think area to be able to not to expose. Then I think that kind of standard is far less than the everything public current state of Ethereum. And I want to see more of the standardization between different chain, which supports a kind of privacy layer to see. We don't have to show something private and we can't, but I think, yeah, it's good to know which, some standardization around that area, I think.
I think I will go with Simon here saying that it will be kind of like almost like a SaaS thing, like someone will build for them and they will just consume. Anyone has any other question?
Yeah, so before you were saying that when people finish the Dune course, they all got a job like pretty easily. But that hasn't really been my experience. And like for me, it wasn't that easy to find jobs as data scientist. There aren't a lot of offers, and I think we're not there yet. So how do you actually onboard protocols to start hiring or using data scientists?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate the comment. So I guess that it's the other side of the market, which is maybe it's not that visible in terms of the way many analysts have gotten jobs so far is by getting into some discords, getting involved into some communities. So there's no open marketplace for data analyst jobs in crypto, and yeah, it's a great point. Something we've done recently is launch like data jobs in crypto. So on Dune website, you can see protocols and companies that are hiring for data analysts. It's still a small thing. It's something we put together in like 2 weeks or something. So it's not like, but I think there's a lot of work to do in making all of these companies that are hiring visible. Many times these companies are hiring but they don't have an open application. You don't know it yet. They are looking for something that happens very often to us is that Dune analysts, we call them wizards, people reach out to them and offer them jobs. And if you have somehow of a good profile on Dune, you're going to be making money one way or the other for sure. But the question is, how do we make all of these companies and protocols that are hiring for analysts be more visible and for this not to be something a little bit of an insider thing. So I appreciate it.
Okay, I think we're over time. And my mic is working finally. All right.
Not
Thank you. Not for long. Thank you so much. And appreciate it.